This podcast may contain explicit language. Dry your eyes, baby. It's out of character. Notorious is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
And tonight, for our 326th episode, we discuss Notorious from 1946, celebrating its 80th anniversary. Directed by Sir Alfred Hitchcock, written by Ben Hecht, music by Roy Webb, editing by Theron Worth. Starring Cary Grant as T.R. Devlin, Ingrid Bergman as Alicia Huberman, Claude Rains as Alexander Sebastian, Lewis Calhern as Captain Paul Prescott, Madame Constantine as Madame Anna Sebastian, Reinhold Schunzel as Dr. Anderson. I never know how to pronounce those umlauts. Maroni Olsen as Walter Beardsley, Ivan Trousseau as Eric Mathis, Alex Manadas as Joseph, Wally Brown as Mr. Hopkins, Sir Charles Mendel as Commodore, Ricardo Costa as Dr. Julio Barbosa, Eberhard Krumschmidt as Emil Hupka, and Faye Baker as Ethel. Background for the movie: Notorious premiered on August 15th, 1946 in New York City. On a budget of $1 million, the film is said to have grossed $7.15 million in its initial run and finishing as the estimated number 8 film for the year 1946. Critics were almost all positive regarding the film, and Notorious was nominated for 2 Oscars, Best Supporting Actor for Claude Rains and Original Screenplay for Ben Hecht. Film critic Roger Ebert included Notorious on his list of the 10 greatest films of all time in 1991, citing it as his favorite of Hitchcock's films. Entertainment Weekly voted it number 66 on their list of the greatest films of all time in 1999. The Village Voice ranked Notorious at number 77 in its list of the top 250 best films of the century list in 1999, based on a poll of critics. In 2005, Hecht's screenplay was voted by the Writers Guild of America as one of the 101 best ever written. In 2006, Notorious was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. The American Film Institute included the film in the following lists: AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills at number 38, and AFI's 100 Years, 100 Passions at number 86. The film was voted at number 38 on the list of 100 Great Films by French magazine Cahiers du Cinéma in 2008. Notorious was ranked 68th in BBC's 2015 list of the 100 Greatest American Films. In 2022, Time Out magazine ranked the film at number 34 on their list of the 100 best thriller films of all time. It currently holds a 96% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 100 score on Metacritic, and a 4.1 out of 5 on Letterboxd. But, of course, we can't do this by ourselves, so we bring in our newest celebrity guest. He is the host and creator of the Nostalgia Cast and Back to Bluey, a CLP contributor making his first appearance on the show. Please welcome in Darren Lundberg.
That is an introduction. I appreciate that. How are you guys doing?
Welcome to the show. It's been a long time coming.
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm kind of jealous. You said this is what, 326, and you've got like people like Peterson Hill and Sarah Duncan who are like, what, 10, 12? So I'm kind of upset that this is my first time showing up on your show. I've been a fan of yours. I think through Andrew Corns, I think I met you through his Revisionist Almanac podcast. So, and you guys invited me to be a part of your, what was the list of the greatest movies of all time, and submit my choices for that. So, yeah, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. So I appreciate being invited on. This was months in the making, right?
Yes, I believe so. So, yes, you were a contributor last year, and we're hoping that you submit a list for our upcoming second version of the CLP list that's going to be dropping in about 3 weeks. In fact, as of today's recording, tomorrow, it will be 3 weeks exactly before lists are due from everybody. So I'm hearing in my head all of the scrambling that is immediately going on when my email drops tomorrow morning from everybody, including myself, who has yet to actually start their list.
Well, that list was a huge undertaking, and it made me think about all the different ways we looked at. Yeah, I really like seeing my name pop up when you guys did like the average, whatever had the most. That's the one that made your list, right? It was the 50 greatest. Is that right?
So it wasn't an average. It was the total accumulation of points, and the points were based on where people had them ranked in their individual submission lists. And so it was an inverted way of looking at them. So number one had some additional bonus points, but essentially the number one film would have 50 points because we did a list of 50, and then you'd add bonus points for anything inside the top 10 for people. So just by having, I think, was it Who Framed Roger Rabbit got into the top 100 of the list based on like 3 people's list because they all had it like really high or something like that.
Oh.
There was like 1 or 2 of these films that somehow like boosted its way up the list because I think we only had like 35 or 36 total submissions last year. And I think we have about 5 more that we're planning on for this year, but it's hard to say how everything will shake out. And unlike last year, where I feel like people had an idea of where they were going to go with their lists, when we're talking about the top acting performances of all time, I don't think anybody has a clue where they're going to go. There will probably be about 5 total that I think will have a lot of overlap, but there may just be so much variance between lists that it just may be about who places who at a certain point in their list and how far or how high up things go.
Wow. So Paul Rudd as Ant-Man might actually make that list.
Theoretically, yes, it could.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's interesting. Again, I think these lists are great, and these movie review podcasts are great, especially, we do a nostalgia cast and everything. It's all subjective points of view, right? And how we got to this point, and that's how we judge movies, or that's how we watch movies, or how we rate movies. And so I'm more fascinated. When you look at the list, people get angry that their movie isn't on somebody else's list, which I think is funny because I'm more, why do you have that one on your list? I want to talk about that. And let me figure out where you're coming from. I really like that. And that's another thing we do on Nostalgia Cast, too, is when we bring people in, it's like, I want to know where you come from so you got to this point. I don't want you to, I just think parroting my point of view, I think that's boring. Like, I don't want to be coddled and like just... I want to have conversations. I don't want to go, he liked what I like, moving on. You know what I mean? So even if something makes me angry, I want to talk about that. Why is this movie that I hate, why is that on your list? Then explain that to me, right? So, yeah, the way that you guys structured that list is very fascinating, and I think that shows when you saw the results of it. So, yeah, very smart.
I think several years ago, I took a look at myself and how I interacted with people who were not the crazy cinephiles that we tend to be in this community, and just the casual moviegoer, because in order for us to have the things that we love, we need more engagement from the casual audience. And it's just become, particularly online, so toxic with what I have deemed film shaming, which is you don't share the same opinion. And this is particularly so about like franchise films. But the other one that I see a lot of, and it's even been levied at me. You haven't seen that film? Oh my God, that is like, and you ruin people's expectations. Instead, I've tried to restructure and think about it in an inverted way. Hey, you have the opportunity to see a film I love for the first time yet. I don't have that anymore.
Oh, yeah, exactly. There was somebody on Twitter that posted, I think, their favorite foreign films of the year, and they posted stuff I've never heard of. And so I was like, well, that's on my watch list now, right? I mean, that's what I look for. I don't want to watch Spider-Man 15 again. You know what I mean? I don't want that. I want to watch something that's new and that somebody else isn't. I don't know. Somebody else isn't experiencing. I want to have new experiences when I watch movies, I guess. But yeah, it's very toxic out there, and I think people really have lost the definition of what an opinion is. You know what I mean? So I just think it's so funny when I put together a list. This is my personal favorite list. Like, I put together a Christopher Nolan ranking when The Odyssey came out, right? And I was like, this is my personal favorite list. This is why I like these movies. And people were like, that's so dumb that you don't have this at number 1. I'm like, well, why are you calling me dumb? Like, it's my list. Let me know what your list is, and let's talk about that. I don't get the whole, well, your list doesn't match mine, therefore it doesn't have any resonance with me. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, the naming of things is allegedly invalid just because of that. that strikes me as odd. And hot button topics like Nolan always go for that kind of jugular effect to begin with, because that's one of the few people as a lightning rod that captures the casual fan. And so it becomes much more of an actual conversation because people go and they show up for his movies. The Odyssey, which if you give that out of, I don't know, any other director, save for maybe Cameron and Spielberg, I just don't know that that's making $1 billion. But lo and behold, like 3 weeks later, it's about to cross that threshold. And he does that seemingly with just about every movie he makes. A 3-hour epic about the guy who invented the atomic bomb and is going to win Best Picture that has like one true action sequence. And it's a biopic, not about like some rock star or something, because Michael Jackson, that movie passed $1 billion this year. But just this random guy that nobody thinks of anymore, except like true historians like my dad, the boomers of the world. And that nearly passes $1 billion. So he's going to have a lot of, and I feel like that's why we had a lot of that weird discourse around casting and who was looking right for the part, and which I also found completely destructive myself. Yeah. But it's just better sometimes to ignore all of that, which is so difficult in this environment where, especially as I feel like we're the keepers of film in some ways. Like we're the guardians of what this is. Like, I feel like we have a responsibility, but also it's really hard to do anything about it. I don't know. I'm caught between those ideas.
Yeah. I think maybe, sorry to go so long on this topic, but it's like, I think people have such a strong opinion on Christopher Nolan because they're at an age, or these people that comment, where they've seen all of his movies, right? And so they have a strong opinion. You look at somebody like Hitchcock, right? And again, you guys talk about how you're the keepers, and like, yes, talk about Hitchcock. We need to include these, names that aren't part of the lexicon that people talk about now. I mean, for crying out loud, the Russo brothers are on people's best directors lists, and I'm like, this is shit. You know what I mean? And so again, not. I'm being a hypocrite because I say you should like whatever you like, but it's like, if the Russo brothers, you're more familiar with them than you are with Hitchcock, and we'll talk about it. Hitchcock is foundational for a lot of the movies that are made today. Like, you wouldn't have a lot of same with Spielberg. You would not have a lot of the language we have today if it wasn't for Spielberg. And so I think people just don't have an opinion on that because they haven't watched all those movies, because there's a weird ideal out there that people think that movies didn't exist before like 2000 or 1990 or something, like, so they don't bother with these older movies. And I'm just like, that's like not listening or appreciating the classical music. You have to understand the foundational building blocks of how we got here.
And that's why I've thought about it. I don't have children myself. You both have an experience that I don't, but I've always considered of whether it is better to start, let's say, with like the early 1900s or with classical music, then build up to like jazz and blues and some of the, instead of like putting them in the here and now and slowly like move them throughout time. Is that a better way for them to experience things from back to front, as opposed to the other way around, which is normally we show them the modern stuff because they're going to pay more attention to it? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, as you are aware, I told you music didn't start in 1990, and I've always prided myself on exposing you kids to different genres, different ages of movies and of entertainment. And you think I'm still somewhat of a geek because I love old entertainment and such, like studying, watching these...
Who's my line TikToks?
Yeah. Because they're just fascinating to watch these guys coming on and interacting and promoting a movie that they released in 1954. Like Hitchcock did for Rear Window.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I just think people are lacking plain curiosity. Like, as long as you're curious, start wherever you want and figure it out and work your way through it, right? But I think people just don't have the curiosity where they just don't bother trying these things out. Like, yeah, there's jazz and classical and reggae. There's all this music if we're going to keep with that kind of metaphor or whatever. But it's like, you just don't listen to one type. You've got to appreciate all these other kind of venues and genres. You can, and then hone what you like and what you don't like. And I just think it's weird how so many people, like, I watch a lot of YouTube reactors, and you can tell that they've grown up watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because they'll literally say, is there an end credit scene, or does this connect to a different movie? And I'm like, that's not how movies work, guys. Like, you gotta open your mind to different things. And so it's just frustrating, because I just really. And then when these people watch the older movies, sometimes, like, you watch Casablanca, speaking of Ingrid Bergman, right? And it's like, oh, this movie's actually really good. It's in black and white, but it's hitting all the beats that a movie should hit. And it's like, yeah, I mean, just put yourself out there and try to experience these things instead of just, don't watch Spider-Man 15 and say this is the most new, groundbreaking thing I've ever seen, because then you're like, wow, guys, you're missing out on literally thousands of movies that have been formed. The Spider-Man movie that you're watching. And there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, this is based on here. It's just a question of, oh, it's based on this, but I like this still because of this. I just think people have a lack of curiosity and a lack of being able to, I don't know, place things in context, I guess.
Certainly. I think we could probably go on for another 15 minutes, but I'll just mention the fact that we have now name dropped Rear Window and Casablanca, which was last week's episode. You get it all here, folks. But that looks like a good segue into the main topic for the evening and our discussion on Notorious and Sir Alfred Hitchcock, who will come up quite a bit in this discussion, of course, as he does anytime we discuss any of his films. He is the most often discussed director on the history of this program.
Nice.
And I don't think we've even covered probably half of his material yet. I think we've covered maybe a dozen, and he's got at least like 30 or 40 films that we could probably go through.
Strangers on a Train?
Yeah. We have a lot. Spellbound.
Not yet. Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
We haven't covered Rebecca. We haven't covered Suspicion. So there's a lot still on the tree to pick from if we really want to. And that's not even talking about like the deep cuts like Trouble with Harry or Frenzy or 39 Steps, for example.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot that we can still mine from this. Like, we have at least another good 10 seasons if we really wanted to stretch it out, and the amount of things that we could still cover. But let's start, as we always do, with relationships to the film. I will point out, I have never seen this film until this week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This was a glaring omission in my Hitchcock oeuvre, and I put it on the show specifically because I wanted to cross this off. And usually I very strategically will put things on for myself where I'm like, you know what, I haven't seen that for a while, or I really want to discuss this, or I haven't ever seen it. Let's put it on the show, give me a good excuse, and then we're going to talk about it. This is another one of those. But Dad, I would say, given that you seem to be the, let's say, Hitchcock fanboy?
Okay.
Well, I'm not really sure how to put it. The right word escapes me, but that's the one I'm going to go with for right now. But going back for years at this point, talking about him on this show, what was your first experience with this movie? Because I know you've been talking this up for many years for me to finally see it.
The first film I saw of Hitchcock's was actually while I was a freshman in college, was The 39 Steps. And that started me on a quest to see as many of these as I could. And Notorious is this film I saw probably, I think it was right after Turner Classic Movies came out as a station, or at least a station available on my cable system. And this was on, and I used to record. I mean, this is back in the days when you were recording on VHS tapes yet, and so I recorded it and watched it. And I'm pretty sure I watched it by myself the first time, but apparently I did watch it again with your mother because she remembered seeing it. And you know how she often feigns or has false memories? She actually was able to remember. She said it has something to do with a key. I remember that. And so I went, you actually did see the film.
Okay, I was gonna say, did you test her? Because it sounds awfully like when she tried to convince me that she'd seen Call Me by Your Name, but couldn't tell me what the peach scene was.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so that's kind of the history. And I've always been a huge Cary Grant fan. So I just thought that this film was wonderful the first time I saw it. And some of the scenes in here that I'm sure we'll talk about, the phone kisses, get past the Hays Code, the zoom shot through the foyer down the stairs, zooming in on the key in her hand from a couple of stories high. I mean, those are just cinema classics. So it's just a film I've enjoyed. And again, Mom and I watched it last night, and she said afterwards, I don't know why we haven't watched this more often.
What's your experience with this, Darren?
Well, we say, again, we're talking about curiosity, right? And when I started being a cinephile, that's when it hit in the 90s. We say this all the time on Nostalgia Cats. That's where Johnny and I really cut our teeth on movies, because that's when we started watching everything. I think like from 90 to 94, 95, we just saw everything in a theater. And then after that, we're like, okay, what else is out there? So that's when I started watching foreign movies like crazy, black and white movies like crazy. That's when, you see Casablanca. Citizen Kane is one that's on the high, like homework. And so I put that off. And so I watched all these classic Hollywood movies. By the time I watched Citizen Kane, it was like, oh, this is a huge breath of fresh air compared to all this. Hollywood, the Hollywood classic style got really stodgy and like just very paint by numbers. And Citizen Kane comes along and like, oh, I can see why this made such a jump, because it's so unlike, Wells famously had to fight back against the production and everything because he was doing things that movies weren't doing. And so that's what really opened my mind to movies can have different voices. It's not just about franchises or blockbusters. You can have these really... That's when I got hooked on Ingmar Bergman and Fellini and Kurosawa. Oh, man, Kurosawa. I just think, all that curiosity, if you don't have that, I don't know how you can not experience a Kurosawa film. I don't know how you can not sit through Seven Samurai or ignore Seven Samurai and feel like you've lived. You know what I mean? There's all these movies out there that are so indelible. And then Hitchcock is when I got... So Roger Ebert had, like you said, that he had it on his top 10 list, but he also had this great movies list where he would do an essay on these great movies. And Ebert gets a lot of flack. His star system, you give 3 stars to Van Helsing. It's like, so it's 1 star away from Casablanca? That doesn't make any sense to me. So, the thumbs up, that hit all that. But when you could tell he was a film scholar, right? So reading that Notorious review that he did, I was like, I have to check this one out. And when you watch Hitchcock, you see Psycho, right? You see North by Northwest. You see all the ones that he's going to be known for. And Notorious was one, even though Ebert had it as his favorite movie, it's not one that you really hear about. But watching it, you compare it to movies you watch now, like you watch silent movies, and they're not very complicated, but they just didn't know how to tell stories, like wide-ranging stories back then. So I can't judge a silent film not being as complicated or well-rounded as a movie now, because there's just different storytelling techniques that I hadn't gotten used to. But when I watched Notorious, it was like, oh, this isn't quite as groundbreaking, or like Psycho gets your attention, right? Vertigo gets your attention. And it was a quiet movie, and I liked it. And I was, again, Dana, like you, I was a big Cary Grant fan. I got addicted to him, and we'll talk about him performance-wise later. But Notorious is a movie I've seen at least a dozen times. And when you had that, I can't remember if you offered that to me, if that was a choice or if I mentioned it or something, but I was just like, yeah, I'll watch that again anytime. And it's like your wife said, Dana, it's like, why am I not watching this more often? I think I'm behind on so many movies that I don't want to watch a movie I've seen before. But when I watched this last night, I was like, first of all, it's only 90 minutes. And so it's like, wow, this is fast. I thought this was going to be like 2 hours or something like that. And it wrapped up pretty fast. So I was like, why am I not watching this more often? And I think in today's age of, like we talked about, Spider-Man movies or Marvel movies, those hit so many beats that you just expect that to go back and watch a movie like this, it kind of reinvigorates you and gives you that trust you once built with movies back when you're kind of getting bored with it. So, yeah, I've just had a long, complicated history with this movie, and Tom, you said that you hadn't seen it, and we talked about how you point at somebody and laugh because they haven't seen it. Like, well, this would be one that I'd be like, you haven't seen Notorious? See Notorious, man. Like, you've got to see this. But I'm just glad that you finally got a chance to watch this and that you are using this selfishly as a reason to watch it. So, yeah, I love this. I adore this movie.
I think that seems to be a common theme. I looked at a lot of my friends' Letterbox ratings and such, and this is all ranking in the 4 and 4.5 range for most people. And we'll get to my personal thoughts on the film and what I thought of it, I guess, as we kind of move forward. But quickly, Dad, do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. In Notorious, Ingrid Bergman stars as Alicia Huberman, daughter of a convicted Nazi spy recruited by American agent T.R. Devlin, Cary Grant, to infiltrate a ring of German conspirators hiding in Rio de Janeiro. Devlin falls for Alicia, even as he sends her undercover into a marriage with suspected traitor Sebastian, Claude Rains. As Alicia digs deeper into Sebastian's circle, she uncovers a chilling secret in his wine cellar, while Sebastian's suspicious mother grows weary of her. When Sebastian discovers the truth, Alicia's life is put in grave danger. Devlin must decide whether duty or love will drive him to save her.
Thank you, Dad. I will just briefly pass over the Nazi reference in there as let's say an homage to Brad Pitt and Inglourious Bastards, but we'll just move right past that. Regardless, what is the film about?
I think this movie's about, if you trust, right? It's about betrayal. It's about women's desire to be trusted and men's need basically to open up, right? Open up to love or romance or other experiences. We talked about 39 Steps, Dana, which was one of the movies. I love the 39 Steps. It's so fun. It's like, 80, 90 minutes. It goes by so fast. And you think of Hitchcock, Foreign Correspondent, all that, Lady Vanishes, just classic thrillers, right? And I think it's fascinating that because of the process of making this movie, this was the first movie I think that Hitchcock had full-on producer duties on. Kozo Selznick, who brought him over famously from England and did Rebecca, won the Oscar for Best Picture or whatever. He had to step aside and was too busy with like Duel in the Sun or something like that. So he decided to sell the rights to this movie to RKO. And that basically freed up Hitchcock to be his own producer. So I think this is his first like really personal. The way that it's psychologically complex, like 39 Steps and Foreign Correspondent, I wouldn't think of them as psychologically complex. I just think of them as being these fun thrillers, that move like a bullet. And so this movie, personally, I just think it's more about like, oh, this is him, like this is his first. You can look at The Lodger as being the first true Hitchcock movie or whatever, the silent film, but this is like the one that he finally got to delve into a lot more deeper kind of ideas and themes. And so just the idea, it's so heartbreaking what Alicia goes through in this movie. It's when you think about it, it's really, really heartbreaking and so sad. And so even Rebecca, which won Best Picture, is a lot, not the normal Hitchcock picture. I think it's more psychologically complex than he'd ever done before. I think that's one of the things that really impresses me about the movie.
I think in part he's also looking at Notorious as being a precursor as to what exactly is likely to happen in the post-war world as far as spies and what extent people are going to have to sacrifice themselves and their circumstances in order to fulfill or a need to protect their nation or their cause. And I think it's also the interplay of a man's duty versus his love and a woman's virtue versus her sense of duty.
Yeah. A lot of deep stuff in here.
I would say that I agree with a lot of what you guys have put down. What I would also add is this does not seem out of character for a lot of work that he'd done up to this point, at least that we've discussed on the course of the show. Sabotage, The Lady Vanishes, you mentioned Foreign Correspondent a second ago. All of these have to deal with spycraft or somebody's being deceptive or there's some greater giant plot that is underfoot. Somebody's trying to do something that's undermining a war effort or is part of some greater conspiracy or any number of things that seemingly go on during this period. And leading up to this, we've had Saboteur is in there, and you'd have to tell me, Dad, is Lifeboat kind of in the same vein? I've never seen that one either.
Okay. Lifeboat is kind of an odd one because it all takes place. It's like a wide range of people stuck in a lifeboat trying to survive. And so it's completely different than anything. But it was very personal for Hitchcock because it was filmed during the war, during the Battle of the Atlantic. And so this is something that people in Britain and the United States were constantly thinking about because the possibility existed on any ocean-going voyage of ending up in a lifeboat like that. So it's kind of an odd one, but that's really where his collaboration with Hume Cronin started, was with Lifeboat, and they worked together. And I think, if I remember right, he's credited with doing some of the rewrite on this one as well.
He returns to a lot of these themes often, or at least these subjects, because I think he's still trying to mine something in here that I don't think he ever quite encapsulates. Because even when we get to something by Northwest, where I feel like it's the truest form of the spy thriller, somebody's got some grand conspiracy, and he's taken it to, I think, the furthest extent of what this kind of genre he was trying to play with or craft or mold really meant to be. Between the remake of The Man Who Knew Too Much in 56, or 55 or 56?
Yes. 56.
One of, either way, 55 or 56, I guess it doesn't matter. And then North by Northwest, you would think that he finally graduates to a level where he's satisfied with this genre, but he kept making films about spies and about war and people with suspicious plots for 3-4 decades at least. And other than maybe like horror and specific like neighborhood thriller kind of situations, you know, the uncle that you have, the long lost uncle that you are heroically projecting upon, he is somehow a serial killer, or you show up at some random hotel and all of a sudden you have the clerk is going to murder you. Just the random things that go bump in the night that are very close to you. I think this is one that he returns to very often, maybe because it has the byproduct of being suspicious by nature, or it is something that he's fascinated by. And what we get in this film, at least for me, watching it for the first time, is this kind of, and I feel he represents this quite a bit in most of these movies, the notion of your personal feelings and your personal emotions versus your accepted obligations or duties. I think we're very much at an era of culture where people felt, I think, a much stronger emotional attachment to their nationality, their government, their way of life by extension of that, than they do necessarily now, where we're very distrustful of a lot of those institutions. And so for somebody like Devlin, who has to choose between, do I represent my own personal feelings and attachments, or do I do my job? That becomes the basis for the dichotomy of the entire film. Meanwhile, and Darren mentioned trust earlier, Alicia wants to trust Devlin, but she holds back. He wants to trust her, but there's a reason that he doesn't do that. And ultimately, what does the film exactly say about trust when those two end up fine in the end because they held a little bit back and they kept themselves at distance? But the most trusting person of all of these is Alex Sebastian, and he gets bitten in the ass.
True. Yep. He's maybe the most, I'm going to sound like I'm quoting like 1,000 other people, but like he's very sympathetic as a villain. Like he says all the time, like, I don't really want to do this, or, you know, they don't come right out a lot of the time and say these are Nazis, you know what I mean? But they're definitely, that's what they're up to. And so it feels like Sebastian is kind of separated from that. And it's fascinating, and we'll probably talk about this. Like, I think he loves Alicia more truly and sincerely than Devlin does. Like he trusts her. Like Devlin, it's fascinating how Devlin's like distrustful of her, and then he tells her, this is what I want you to do, and she does it spectacularly, and he hates her for that. It's just a very fascinating kind of And I agree with you, Tom. It's like, yeah, all these little, I'm going to name drop here. Like Yashizuru Ozu would always do these stories about like a daughter and her father and families and how they separated. And he did the same plot like in 4 or 5 movies, right? Early summer or late spring, stuff like that. And I think it was more of him trying to figure out, well, what am I trying to say here? How do I reconcile a lot of these things? And so, yeah, I agree with you. That's what Hitch is basically doing with all these spy thrillers. It's funny watching this. All these, and you guys just talked about this, all the character relationships and all the emotions that they're holding in. I think that's what's a lot richer here than we'd seen before in 39 Steps. So I think I don't think there'd be a Vertigo without Notorious. You know what I mean? Like there has to be some kind of journey to get there. And I think Notorious is a big step to making him more of a mature. We're comparing it to Spielberg, really. Like, Spielberg had the same stuff. Like, he made these blockbusters, but nobody really thought of him as a good, quality, mature filmmaker, and that's what he always struggled against. And I think Hitchcock kind of had the same battle here. But, yeah, all these character dynamics are just very rich and fascinating.
And one thing I will give him credit for being what is, quote-unquote, a popular director of his era that was engaging people on a more entertaining level, unlike a lot of the directors from now, with maybe a little bit of a caveat or exception to James Cameron, name me the great film from Steven Spielberg that has a really complicated female figure. Name me, for that matter, like the Christopher Nolan movie that really has a great, complex female character to it. There are very few. Like, I'll give Nolan a little bit of a pass. There are a couple, like Interstellar, where I feel like he actually creates some more complex female characters. But Hitchcock has Rebecca, and he has this movie, and he has, I would even say, and I know this is not shared necessarily among all people, but both Dial M and Rear Window have a much more complex female character to them than is maybe presented at the forefront, because those movies are not necessarily about the Grace Kelly character per se. It's more about the male figures, but they're not surface level characters to me. And so to have something like this, where Devlin is constantly questioning her for something that I think in a modern sense he would be criticized for, essentially slut shaming.
Yeah, it's unfair what he's doing, yeah.
Yeah, that he's questioning her ability or her, I guess, savvy, and that complicates in some ways our own feelings, I would say, about her in this. Like, I didn't think much of it early on in the film, but the more he seems to throw it back in her face, you're like, well, I mean, she is promiscuous, so maybe he's got a point here, and it starts to color our own understanding of her. But is that me projecting my own feelings on her and the situation? Is the film meant to actually sympathize her? I guess that is somewhat
Both.
where I'm stuck between, again, two ideas.
Ultimately, I think the key here is Hitchcock's secret weapon, which is Hitchcock was involved in the writing. He always did all the rewrites. He did the edits. His secret weapon, his wife Alma. She was intricate in this, and I swear she was the voice a lot of the time of the strong female character, because she was a huge influence on him and in his life.
It's interesting that we're talking about this now. I keep mentioning this, but the newest Spider-Man that's out, whenever a conversation about Spider-Man comes around, it always comes back to, isn't Mary Jane from the Raimi movie such a bitch because she's like pushes back on him all the time? And my argument is always, okay, we're only watching this movie from the point of view of the protagonist, right? And so when Mary Jane is pushing back on stuff, yeah, we're going to get mad at her, but you have to understand that he's being an asshole a lot of the time. Like he's being secretive. He's not putting himself out there. He's shunning her. He's avoiding her. And so naturally she's going to have her own wants and desires. She's going to go out and do these things, right? I think, and it's odd, I bring that up because it's odd that this movie talks about that, because we're basically seeing Alicia through Devlin's eyes a lot of the time, right? We don't know anything about her besides what, like at the beginning when her dad's on trial and the reporters are talking about her, and that's how we get to know she's promiscuous and she's kind of has these weird ties to the Nazi party, right? And then Devlin comes in and it's Cary Grant, right? So we're naturally going to gravitate towards him. And I think we just see it from his vantage point, and we keep seeing it. And we see it when you put yourself in Alicia's shoes, which a lot of people can't seem to do with a lot of these female characters. it's like, oh, you see her like, he keeps pushing that back in her face, but she keeps like agreeing with it, right? Because she's like, well, if you're just going to think that of me, then why should I fight it? Everybody thinks this of me. And it's heartbreaking because you see that in her eyes. Dana, I wanted to ask you as like the Hitchcock aficionado here, or the fanboy. You talk about Alma being a real presence, but Hitchcock had a weird fascination with a lot of these like blondes, right? Like he puts them through hell a lot of the time. What are your thoughts on that, and how does like Alicia tie in with that? Yeah, because you look at Vertigo, the way they treat Kim Novak's character is like, oh gosh, you know what I mean? So how does Alicia play into that?
Well, there's conversation. It's never really been said openly, but there was conversation by some of his biographers that through a large portion of Hitchcock's life, he was impotent. And so it was his own sexual frustrations that sometimes came out in these films. But he also then, I mean, when you think about it, what does Alicia ultimately do? Her promiscuity is her own way of self-sabotage. It's her way of reducing herself to the same level as her father. She's no better or worse than he is. So therefore, yeah, I'm a slut. Whatever.
I guess I just don't understand some of the commentary that people pushing back. Has no one been in a relationship, not just like in a romantic relationship,
Yes.
but give and take, like even a friendship. If you're just getting just raw support, I don't know what that's necessarily like. Unless you're expecting an automaton on the other end. Are we talking to AI too much that's just broadly supporting? Oh, that's a wonderful idea, Jerry. You should really run with that. Maybe write that script about the vacuum cleaner that goes out of its way to sell itself on its Broadway dreams. What?
In a way, this is the same conversation we had about a person giving their opinion on a movie. I don't want my opinion just parroted back at me. It's nice. Great, I get like validation from it, but that doesn't lead to a conversation. It's the same thing with a relationship. I don't want somebody that's just going to coddle me the whole time and never call me on my bullshit. You know what I mean? I want somebody that's going to push back and make sure that I'm honest. And you're right. A lot of these people that complain about Spider-Man or anything like that, I don't think they've had relationships, even a friendship. I don't think they know what that means. I really think that they're like, this is about me, and you should just support me no matter what I do and never call me on anything bad that I do. That's a really weird infantile attitude.
It is the number one thing that everybody misunderstands about me on a personal level, outside of podcasting and everything else, is I try and engage on discussion, debate, and the rest of it, and people just see me as argumentative. And I like people that will push back on me, will engage me in that willingness to say, you know what? I don't agree with you, but let's discuss it and go to that level. And I don't see that willingness by a broad section of the public anymore to even engage on things like that, that conversational level. I don't have to agree with you, but I'm interested in what you have to say. And I wish more people would fight me a little bit.
Well, I think a lot of this movie, too, has to do with communication, right? Alicia and Devlin aren't communicating. They keep throwing their flaws in each other's faces instead of being honest. And we'll talk about it. It takes him finally manning up to finally break that mold so he can save her, right? If he doesn't get over himself, then she's doomed. And so, and that can be kind of, you can look at that as kind of a dated ideal, like the woman has to be saved, right? But she's literally been trapped by her reputation. And Dana, like you said, it's like, oh, I'm just going to be whatever. Why fight what people say that I am, right? And so because they don't communicate, and it breaks my heart, the note that I have is every conversation that these two have, they're not honest with each other. They get hurt really easy, and she'll throw something at him and he'll throw something back, and it'll escalate, and they'll just be wrecked because they know that they love this person, but they just can't get over themselves long enough to really talk about that. And I think it's that lack of communication. I love that we're talking about this movie in this context because it applies to so much now. It's that lack of communication that really keeps us from seeing where we come from.
And I guess I was struck. So Dana presented this to me probably a week and a half ago, whether he thought Cary Grant or Claude Rains was the better performance in this film. And we're obviously going to get to better performances and such. But I bring this up to illustrate. I thought dismissively, to begin with, Claude Rains would be the better performer in my mind, simply because most of the films that I've seen Cary Grant in, not that he's bad by any means, and he's a very capable actor, but his range is not necessarily there. He is, to me, a classic golden age movie star as opposed to an actor. Whereas Claude Rains, being a character actor, had to actually do a lot of acting. And I've seen him in broad performances, whether it's Mr. Smith or Casablanca or now Voyager, do these much deeper, intricate performances that have a subtlety, a slyness, a coolness to them that felt like the underhanded dagger that gets you right between the ribs when you're not expecting it. And I was, frankly, blown away by Grant in this at how much he feels like he pulls back that iron coldness that he presents in here that I don't think I've seen in any other film of his. And I'm not sure what to say that is necessarily a byproduct of. Is that simply self-protection? Is it insecurity? Is it a certain level of misogyny? Is it just him trying to do this for his own sake of duty, or what he wants to put? And I'm, again, caught between different thoughts of how do I really see this character?
Well, duty, insecurity, and misogyny are all so intertwined in men.
Okay.
Their
Point taken.
insecurity
Point
is
taken.
what causes the other two. Because either they wrap themselves in their duty, honor, or profession, or they blame the woman. Because it's too hard to admit your own insecurities and your own faults. So it's just easier to take the high road. Well, I'm the professional here and I can vouch by it. Or the other is she's just a slut and, she's not worth my time. And it's unfortunate. But I think in this case, you can see Grant's inner turmoil between the feelings of all three of these all at the same time.
I 100%, again, not to, we want to have conversations, right? But I do 100% agree with that, Dan. It's like, men are complicated. Like, he's got all these things that are going on. And I love movies where a character doesn't just have one character trait or one personality trait. Like, you can see Grant go through all these emotions when he's talking to her. And it's unnatural for him because, Tom, I like that you said that these movie stars, Grant doesn't have a lot of range. John Wayne didn't have a lot of range, you know what I mean? But you went to go see movies because of their personas, and they really sell. And when you get a Grant performance like this, I think that's really sells it. But there are just so many things going on in his head, and he's fighting them. You can see him fighting them all in his face all the time and in his body language. And it's just fascinating from that point of view. I love that when you posted that question, you sent that to me. It's like, I think it's all three. Like, he's a complicated guy. Like, this is a complicated situation. It's not just black and white.
I don't say the term star or film star to be dismissive per se.
Oh, yeah.
I know that's often associated with people where, well, they can't act, so they're just a movie star. It takes a certain persona and charisma that I don't think, maybe some of it is natural, of course, but that you have to be able to sell things. Like, if there's nothing else than this year alone in cinema, it's proving yet again that stars somehow matter, whether it's directors or actors. Matt Damon's in a headlining film for Christopher Nolan. Now, to be fair, Christopher Nolan putting out a film is probably going to get huge numbers by itself. But Ryan Gosling doing Project Hail Mary, big ass film. And if nothing else, Tom Holland and Zendaya being at the front of a Spider-Man movie again, big movie. So I want to say Dune is going to yet again cross over the $1 billion mark because Chalamet's in it. And it's seemingly, when Marty Supreme gets, what was it, $400 million or something like that, that's a small indie film that is really just attached to us wanting to see Chalamet be a terrible human being for some reason. Yeah. Like, nobody would else want to see that film if he's not in it. So it's not to dismiss that movie stars don't matter. It's that we rarely see this combination of true acting ability and range in really charismatic people. And when we usually find it, it's like narrowed in on a very few people, and you could probably name them on a couple of hands. I think Chalamet is a very good actor who also captures a certain charisma for a generation beneath me as to a certain level of like wanting to see him in everything. For my generation, to a degree, it was DiCaprio, was very much that great actor, always in a charismatic role. We're going to go out and see him. Tom Hanks, to a degree, was kind of in that same bubble. John Wayne, I think, wasn't given a whole lot of material to be really deep on, but when he occasionally got a part where he could really sink his teeth into it, whether that's The Searchers or The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, True Grit, he actually did do something with it. So it's not to be that Cary Grant isn't a capable actor. Like, I love watching Cary Grant. Don't get me wrong. North by Northwest is my favorite Hitchcock, partly because he plays it so well in that movie. But that is a movie star performance where he's relying so much on the charisma of being this guy that you're rooting for that it doesn't require him to do a whole lot of character study or depth. But that's not what that part calls for either. I don't think we have to view all these movies in this same box, that just because you're not doing a huge range of acting that the movie can't be entertaining or can't be something worthwhile, etc. I don't want to like somehow have that thrust upon me that I'm being overly putting him in this category, because I also just watched Charade for the first time probably about a month ago. He's wonderful in that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's a great way for him to have ended his career. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know of a man that could be sexier showering with all his clothes on like he does. Like Grant really sells that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is in no way denigrating. I'm just saying there are movie stars that you go to see. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when you get a Grant in here that it's really you don't expect that from him. And it's like, yeah, like John. It's funny that we're talking about John Wayne, because I think the way that Hawks or Ford used him, a lot of people didn't use him that way. And it's the same thing with Grant. Like Hitchcock uses him the same way he uses Jimmy Stewart. It's like they've got more shades to them than we're used to. And it's just fascinating when you get a performance like this that's like, oh, this guy can actually put in a great performance if he's really given the right material.
Before we hit the hour mark, let's move on to Did You Know? Did you know? After filming had ended, Cary Grant kept the famous Unica key. A few years later, he gave the key to his great friend and co-star Ingrid Bergman, saying that the key had given him luck and hoped it would do the same for her. Many years later, at a tribute to Sir Alfred Hitchcock, Bergman went off script and presented the key to him, to his surprise and delight. So somebody has got it, and it's probably in the Hitchcock estate.
Just unlocking cellars, right?
Mm-hmm. Did you know? Sir Alfred Hitchcock got the shot where Ingrid Bergman is in the background and the coffee cup is in the foreground, with both in focus, by using a giant coffee cup placed farther away than it actually appears.
That's a joke that's done in like something like Top Secret, right? Where you have that scene where it's I don't know if how each of you have seen it, but it's like there's a phone that's in the foreground and you think, oh, it's just, this is one of those shots. But then the guy comes up and it's literally a giant phone. Like he picks it up and it's like huge. I like that is, we're talking about indelible Hitchcock imagery. I like that is played. It's so well known that it's kind of played as a joke in a lot of movies.
Did you know? Director Sir Alfred Hitchcock and screenwriter Ben Hecht consulted Nobel Prize winner Dr. Robert Millikan on how to make an atomic bomb. He refused to answer, but confirmed that the principal ingredient, uranium, could fit in a wine bottle. It's tough to imagine to a degree that I watch this movie now and I'm like, oh yeah, uranium. But this is also 1946 and the Russians didn't have the makeup of the bomb yet and how closely guarded everything was. It's kind of unusual how ahead of the rest of the world he seemed to be on this.
If I remember correctly, I think the FBI followed Hitchcock around for a good little bit because of his conversation with Millikan. Because that wasn't, when they decided on uranium ore as the MacGuffin for the movie, nobody knew how that tied in with the atomic bomb like they just dropped on Hiroshima. And so when all the Manhattan Project stuff came out, people were like, how did you know that? And that reminds me too of like how Die Hard with a Vengeance, like the intricacies of the gold reserve, like they just made that up, but supposedly it was like very close to how it actually works, and so they had questions for McTiernan on that movie. It's that they decided on uranium ore, I think, is really funny because they didn't know how big it was going to be. And Danny, you talked about this movie being a post-war movie. It's fascinating how that ties in there. It's really funny.
So it's funny you mentioned that. Sir Alfred Hitchcock claimed that the FBI had him under surveillance for 3 months because the movie dealt with uranium. During the production in early 1945, the use for uranium ore was not common knowledge due to secrecy. But after the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima in 1945 and the release of the details of the Manhattan Project, it removed any doubts about its use.
Like this old, bald Englishman would somehow have ties to the atomic bombs. That's pretty funny, but you can never be too sure.
And Dad, this one is just for you because I usually try to make you laugh with the last one that I have. Did you know? Sir Alfred Hitchcock said he was inspired to do the kissing scene in part by the memory of a young couple he spotted from a train in France. The boy was urinating against a wall, and the girl had hold of his arm, never letting go. Quote, she'd look down at what he was doing and then look around at the scenery and down to see how far he'd got on, Hitchcock explained. And that was what gave me the idea. She couldn't let go. Romance must not be interrupted even by urinating.
Yeah.
Oh, Hitch. Anyway, so that looks like a good spot for our first break. We'll be right back. There we go. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 327th episode, we discuss La La Land from 2016, celebrating its 10th anniversary. Written and directed by Damien Chazelle, cinematography by Linus Sandgren, music by Justin Hurwitz, editing by Tom Cross, starring Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone, John Legend, and Rosemarie DeWitt. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Before we get too much further, let's check in with our guest. Darren, what's going on with you? What are you working on, and where can people find you?
Well, I've got 2 podcasts out there, Nostalgia Cast, which I mentioned before. My best childhood friend Johnny, like we decided to cover movies that were, you grew up with. And again, you're seeing a lot of people talk about how, people only like the Raimi Spider-Mans because of nostalgia. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because you're basically saying that every piece of art has an expiration date, right? Like the Mona Lisa, you only go to appreciate that because of nostalgia, right? And then watching something like Ghostbusters Answer the Call that came out, and people were just literally sending death threats to the cast, to the actresses. And it's like, nostalgia can be a dangerous thing. I think people like really attach themselves to these things that mean so much to them that they're going to, push, like threaten other people's lives. It's strange. And so we decided to do a podcast on, what movies did we watch with rose-colored glasses? What movies did we love as kids that aren't quite, don't quite make the cut nowadays because our sensibilities have changed? And so we started doing these like little known movies that you'd find in a bin at Walmart, like from 1980 or something like, I haven't seen this in 10 years. And my rule is always, I don't want to cover a movie that people have covered before. But then we started doing, because our guest shows, and movies like Princess Bride and Back to the Future, and we realized, and even Star Wars, which I refuse to talk about, but we managed to do that for 100th episode, where it's like, we can be nostalgic or we can just talk about movies that we love versus movies that we have no idea about. So we started doing, like I mentioned, 90s movies. We kind of had a 90s Palooza season. We really loved that because we really cut our teeth on a lot of these movies. And now we're finishing up. For a retrospective, it's a long season. Like we're talking 4 movies for every year of the 90s we've covered. And so we've just finished up 98. We did Pleasantville. Speaking of Spider-Man was our last episode. We're going to dive into 99 after we take a short break. But yeah, that's what we're doing there now. And then we're going to decide what we're doing for our next season. And then I'm back to Bluey, covering it with my best podcasting friend, best online friend, Robert Yanis Jr. We cover the Bluey TV show, 7-minute episodes, and we talk about what these things mean from the perspective of a parent. And the thing I love most about Nostalgia Cast, like I love about your show here, guys, is that it's about conversations. It's not just about tweet-sized opinions on things. We can dive into these things. And with Back to Bluey, it's like, in this age of cynicism and so much hate, it's like you need a break. And so talking about this cartoon about anthropomorphic cartoon dogs and just finding such joy and peace in these things, I think that's what we really pride ourselves on over there. And we always surprise each other with we have 40-minute conversations on 7-minute episodes of a cartoon, which sounds crazy, but there's so much to dive into, and it does us so much good. Like a conversation about movies can do us a lot of good. A conversation about 7-minute cartoons can really work for you. So yeah, we're really trying to get people to check that out and watch more Bluey if they can get a chance to do that. But yeah, that's what I'm up to. And you can find me on Twitter at DW Lundberg. You can find me at Blue Sky, dwlundberg.bsky.social, and then I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Threads at Darren Lundberg. So yeah, I'm all over the place. Just look for Nostalgia Cast or Back to Bluey, and you'll find me.
And as usual, all of our guests' links and attributes are on the website as well as in the show notes for anybody that wants to catch what he is working on.
Appreciate that.
We left off at Best Performance. Dad, who did you have down?
I had Cary Grant for all the very reasons that we discussed earlier. I think his performance was subtle and moving and gripping and.
I have him as my best secondary character or secondary performance here. I really, really appreciate him, but I went with the default and I went with Sir Alfred Hitchcock as my best performance. It's really hard to say that of all the things that stand out, that it's not the visual storytelling, it's not the emotion evoked, it's not the collective acting performances. And so as a result, I feel like almost on a weekly basis, we just default commonly to the directors. But in this case, can you really blame me?
No, I didn't know you could do directors because my mind was more on the performance. I also picked, like Dana, I picked Cary Grant. And the reason I have, obviously, when you think of Cary Grant, I think the word charisma automatically comes to mind. And so it might be easier saying, oh, most charismatic performance is Cary Grant. But for the first time, I think he's really giving a performance here. It is really odd seeing how standoffish he is and how cold he is, knowing what a warm, wonderful performer he is, and him just being an asshole to Alicia the whole time. You're like, this isn't very Cary Grant. But that's like we said, it's like John Wayne in The Searchers or Red River. It's like, oh, we're plumbing something that we've never seen before. And it's just so frustrating, not just that Alicia keeps playing into the role that she's been assigned, right? But it's like Devlin keeps shoving it back in her face and never trusts her, and just he's hurt and he's a child a lot of the time. And so that it's so weird seeing him be such an unlikable character that when he decides to man up, when he finds out that she's sick and her life is in danger and he goes in there to save her, the movie becomes something completely different. And all of a sudden it's like this movie that I've loved so far, it's weird saying this, but it kicks into high gear, right? As much as I love it, now it kicks into high gear and it's like, pow, it really hits you. And I think it's just because again, Bergman's just sitting there. She's kind of out of it. She's on pills, sleeping pills. She can't really do much. But the way that he marches in there and takes charge, finally, you're like, this is the Cary Grant that we've been missing. And he weaponizes that charm, I think. And so that's what makes this performance so good. And they just work so well together. I don't know. It's a magical, oh, this is what this guy can do. You know what I mean? So that's why I have him as my best performance in here.
And for all those same reasons, he's my best secondary because it's such an unusual performance for him. You made him out to be this unlikable character, and that's the movie star quality. On the page, I would agree with you. All the things about this particular person I would have disagreements with or would have a problem with. But ultimately, in the same fashion, I still like him. Like, I'm rooting for him, and that's the point of putting a movie star in one of these unlikable roles is you still have that charisma to want to root for them even when they're getting in their own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, I had secondary performances Claude Rains, and it's the simple fact, by the end of the film, you felt sorry for him. You were almost rooting that they would let him get into the car and leave with him.
That is true.
Okay, for my secondary, there's really only 3 or 4 performances, like lead performances in this movie, right? So I think we're all going to basically pick the same thing. But I have Bergman as my secondary. There's not a lot you can say negative about her. I know that Casablanca, I think maybe there hasn't been anybody in the history of movies that's been as beautiful as she is in that movie. But now you see her in Notorious, and she's also got, I don't want to say she doesn't have shades as Elsa or whatever, but it's like she's so much more of a deep character that you really feel for her. Like, you see it when she decides to play into her role, right? And say, oh no, I'm drunk, right? Or no, I've added into my list, right? It's like, it's so heartbreaking to see that she knows she's a pawn. And that scene, again, the visuals of how she realizes that she's being poisoned, like because of the way that the drink is there in her face and she notices it, and the way that the other guy, the doctor, goes for her cup and they freak out. And the way that she knows, it's so heartbreaking because she knows that Devlin is leaving, right? That he's bored with her is what she thinks. And now she realizes that this other guy that she trusts, supposedly trusted now, he's going to kill her. He's killing her, literally, right? Funny enough, they're killing her with a foreign agent, right? Which is what Grant is basically. But the way that you see in her face that she knows that she's trapped, and she collapses at the stairs, and then they take her up. The people that are killing her literally carry her up and put her in her deathbed. And she just, like you said again, Dana, how she just plays into her role that society has set for her. It's like she accepts it, right? She knows this is her role and there's nothing she can do. And it's so scary and it's so heartbreaking that these 2 men that are supposed to watch out for her are basically putting her in danger. I just think that that's such a good performance here, as much as I love Cary Grant.
And there are certain roles that people take on that go against what their type is, per se. We talked about this, I think, last week, where I couldn't remember what her second Oscar was for. I think it's for The Bells of St. Mary's, and that was shortly after Gaslight. But you take and you stack up Casablanca and Gaslight and The Bells of St. Mary's, like all 3 of them basically right in a row, and this movie is coming off the heels of that. In those 3 movies, she's very much the femme fatale. She's the innocent. In this movie, she is no longer innocent, and she's playing directly into, she is being taken advantage of. She is still the femme fatale, but it's much more of the kind of like Gilda we talked about earlier this year, a few months back. She's very much this kind of between thing. She is not innocent, but she's also not, she is a little bit of the victim here too. And so it's kind of this wavering performance where you have this level of sympathy, but it's such a complex nature that is built up throughout the course of the movie as to whether or not, I wouldn't even say it's not justifying anything that she's done to this point, but it makes you at least feel kind of in the same way that you do a little bit for like alcoholics or drug addicts, a little bit that their bad choices are getting in their own way. And I guess you feel the same thing for Devlin, that these people that you want them to find their happiness, you want them to succeed, and they just keep putting themselves back. And so she's my most charismatic.
Dana, who did you have for charismatic?
For me, I had thought about it, but I ultimately went with Hitchcock for charismatic because I think that this film really kind of cemented him as having a particular genre. And I think that this film really led to his run into the 50s. He had some clunkers after this in the late 40s, and really it was not until he got to Strangers on a Train that he started having commercial success again. But still, I think, the fact that Ebert said this was his favorite film and such, I think this is one of the classics that was the foundation for his run in the 50s.
Well, I'll stick with the actors here because I do want to talk about Claude Rains. I do have him as my most charismatic, and the reason I have him is like we talked about. You really feel sorry for him. Like he's really, you feel that his love for Alicia is a lot deeper and a lot more sincere and a lot more genuine. I think he really sells that. I think he sells that he's trapped by the Nazi party. He sells that he's basically in the clutches of his mom, right? The mom controls everything. But you still feel for him in the end. So when he's literally walking them down those steps, and I'll talk about Hitchcock and what I feel about him as a director when we talk about legacy and things like that. But when he gets down those steps and he's like, please take me with you. And like Devlin's like, nope, no room. Like, and they drive off. And then what's his name says, come up here. Can you come back in here for a second, Alex? We need to talk to you. It's like, oh, you feel bad for him because you know what's going to happen. And that's, as a Nazi sympathizer, that's a huge thing that we can feel sorry or feel something for this guy.
I'm going to get to that last shot here and before too long, but the way that the door and the light that is just pouring out of it, and it feels like the gates of hell that he's walking back towards, I thought that was, I've never seen something framed quite so that way as a final shot for a film. And then the doors just kind of like close with that thud. And it's like you've gone to your own doom. And again, I agree with you from the charismatic portion because I mentioned this near the top. He's the one that's the most trusting, and he's the one that gets bitten in the ass.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's move to best scene. I have 5 nominees here. I have After Party, which is the scene immediately following, and then, boy, it's hard not to extend it beyond that, but the party itself after the trial at the opening of the film, I think it's possible that you could make it an all-encompassing moment where Devlin gets in the car with Alicia and they start drunk driving, which we'll get to during Classicness. That's not aged particularly well, but regardless, I didn't know how to separate all of that stuff here at the beginning, but I felt like something should be put together. The next scene I have is Job Assignment, which is when he comes back in after he's been told what they're going to actually be doing and what she's going to be required. The reason I put this in as a best scene is that notion where he wants to tell her what to do, but he feels like he's required not to push her into a particular thing. And he is so angry at his own government, the people in charge of him, but at the same time, he recognizes that this is all part of what I brought her here in the first place to do. It's got to be up to her whether she decides to go along with this or not. And she really wants him to tell her not to, but he just won't do it. Then I have At the Party, which is the kind of the dolly scene that Dana talked about earlier with the zoom in down the staircase and towards the key. But as they're kind of going back and forth, there's a lot wrapped up into that, which is why my next one is In the Wine Cellar. There's a couple of different things going on in there, and I really wanted to separate those two things out. And finally, The Escape, which is the final, let's say, sequence of the film where Devlin comes to the house and then takes Alicia away. So I know that I've probably missed some things. This is not a long scenes movie. It feels like there are a few longer sequences, but it's very edited so that it's shorter scenes overall. So what did I miss?
The only thing I think maybe you missed is the, I don't know. I really like the scene where he's talking with his superiors, right? And they've just had the converse, like, send her in there. She's a whore, basically. Like, and he leaves the champagne bottle, which he promised her. But even before that, I think the kiss scene is very, very important because that's, again, Hitchcock. I love when movies figured out a way to kind of dodge the Hays Code and kind of beat them at their own game. So the fact that he turns it into a makeout scene for 2.5 minutes, but he splits it up so it's not just one long kiss. I think that's forbid the language, it's a great fuck you to the Hays Code, right? It's like, yeah, oh yeah, you think I can't do this? I will do this, right? And it works. I know that like the way that they shot it, Bergman was like, this is really uncomfortable, and Hitchcock was like, just don't worry, trust me, it'll look good. And it does. It just seems like they're having a conversation, but they're so in love with each other, enamored, that they can't help touch each other. I think that's the only other thing that I would have included in one of the great scenes, because it's like I said, it's a great kind of stick it to him kind of scene. I love that.
I'm trying to think of what to call that even. I don't have a great nickname or moniker, and this is one of the rare times that this has ever come up.
Interesting. You wouldn't call it like the kiss scene or the makeout scene?
I tend to...
Dinner plans?
Okay, there we go. We can go with dinner plans. I don't know. It's something where it's like too on the nose.
Yeah.
All right, so nominees here, we have After Party, we have Dinner Plans, Getting the Assignment, Job Assignment, which are two different things, At the Party, In the Wine Cellar, and Escape. What is the best scene?
Dana, you want to go first?
Sure. At the Party. The tracking shot, the key, the suspense, the intrigue of passing, the whole thing leading up to the climactic moments or the discovery. It's like watching fencing.
Nice.
I really loved the tension building in the wine cellar scene, but it feels like that is when a director just repeats himself so often, but they're really good at doing it, you kind of dismiss it as being like, well, okay, Nolan's going to do some big, gigantic action set piece in the middle of his movie that's going to be all practical effects, blah, 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 blah. Well, with Hitchcock, there's going to be some tense moment where somebody is going to open a door or do something that they're not supposed to, and you're just waiting for something to happen, and you know it's about to happen, but it hasn't happened quite yet, and so there's this intrigue between that. I would have loved to have gone that way, but I gotta say, some of the shot sequences of the final escape, the final scene, where he's carrying her down the stairs, more or less, and Alex is with her, and they're kind of dismissing his friends or the cohort off from the library, and then getting in the car, and that, again, the final shot. I just love a lot of the directorial work in that scene. That, for me, that's got to be the one.
Just going quickly through that, I already mentioned what I thought about the dinner plans and the getting the job, getting the assignment. After Party, which I guess we'll talk about. I just like that I love that scene, that stuff where, she's driving drunk, but it keeps cutting to that shot of him reaching out almost like protectively to keep her from, if she's going to go off the road, right? That's very telling for where his character is going to go. At the Party, obviously, that shot, it's got to be one of the greatest shots of all time. I love how it cranes down and it keeps her on the right side of the frame until it gets so close that now she's in the center. I don't know how they did that. It doesn't look like the camera's like moving to the side. It's just that's the way that they captured her. It's just fantastic. And it's a great lead into where they're going. In the wine cellar, you're right. It's like, yeah, he can do this in his sleep, right? But I always gasp the dozen times that when that champagne bottle goes over, like, and it's crazy, right? That you know where it's going to go, but you're still doing that. But like I said, when I talked about Cary Grant, the way that Devlin marches in there and is like, I'm not going to pussyfoot around anymore. I am going to save this woman. I'm done being an asshole, right? And the writing is so perfect. I can't explain. Every time I see the way that they set up, what is his name? The Elias character who points to the wine bottle and it's too obvious. And there's that scene where they plot his death. And the way that the movie is written so that Sebastian knows that he has this woman that's a spy, and if he finds out that the Nazis know about it, that's going to get him killed, right? Because that's going to open their plans. But the way that Alicia, like, because of the way he's trying to basically murder him and his mom, how he says to take the phone out. And then when when Devlin's walking out and he says, I phoned the hospital from inside the room because he clocked there's no phone. I love the writing and how Sebastian traps himself. But it's so wonderful how he knows it's a tightrope, right? It's so suspenseful, and my heart beats just talking about it. My heart pounds. When they're walking out, I'm always like, how are they going to make it? They've got to make it down those stairs, right? They've got to make it out. And there are more steps that they take than there are actual stairs. I love how they prolong that scene, but the way that it's just written so that we know that Sebastian has trapped himself, and because of this situation, they're going to see and tell what's going to happen. Then he's going to be killed. He's going to be killed because he's let this woman. It's so beautifully written, and so it kind of surprises you. We're like, oh my gosh, he's able to walk out because of this situation that they've gotten themselves in. Just chef's kiss. I can't explain how much I think that's such a beautifully written scene. And again, pardon my French here, but it's a fuck yeah scene, right? It's like, yes, it's like it gets even though it's just them walking downstairs, it's a fist pounding moment, because now we've seen Devlin take charge. Now we're seeing Sebastian, pay for his crimes. Now we're seeing Alicia being rescued by somebody for a change. I can't get over that ending. It's so fantastic.
As for a favorite scene of mine, I love kind of the way that this movie opens up. The courtroom scene is one thing, and interjecting you with showing you almost what this film is kind of in a start to be about, where none of the main characters are on stage yet, but we're slowly kind of understanding what the film is about somehow. And then we get to that after party where Devlin's just sitting there with his back to camera. We see his visage, and we clearly know that it's going to be Cary Grant. But between kind of how she's acting and interacting with everybody, how different her character is, I just thought it was a really great entrance point for us as an audience who was not familiar with this version of either of them really yet. Whereas Cary Grant is the very self-assured, suave guy that is going to be so confident that he will break all of your barriers. But at the same time, this woman who has always been the innocent, playing somebody who's drunk and all over the place, it's just the shift in how we've perceived each of these characters, actors, up until this point, I thought was a great shift, and thus I would love to go back and at least watch the opening, probably 15 minutes, because I thought it was a great interjection into the film.
I have At the Party is my favorite scene for basically the same reason why I thought it was the best. With that in mind, I'm just going to go ahead and do my most indelible, which I had as the escape, for a lot of the reasons you provided. One of the things I thought about while I was watching it, you realize that Alex is using Alicia and Devlin as a shield against his cohorts.
Yep.
He has got them in between the two of them. He is using them to block his ability to interact with them. And then the framing and how it ends and the shot angles and everything. The fact that it was filmed or shot with looking up at the two of them, putting them more of on a pedestal as I don't know how they are the saints of the film at this point in time. They're the ones who are going to come out of this hole. And that's kind of where it ends for me. So that's why I have most indelible then.
Well, we skipped over Darren's favorite scene, so let's go back there.
No, I mean, if the favorite scene is still going to be the escape, right? I think that's that's everything to me. That's the scene that really, like, you want a movie with a strong ending, right? And as much as I love the rest of the movie, I think that ending just really solidifies what makes it great. Is it's all the themes, all the characters, all the intrigue, all the suspense finally coming to a head and resolving itself beautifully, right? And then just to like leapfrogging to indelible, I'm gonna say again the kissing scene. Just because of the way that Hitchcock loves to play with the censors. I think that the Hays Code was ridiculous. It didn't trust audiences that they would be able to buy into things, and was making things dangerous that weren't, like, kissing is not dangerous, right? Maybe for the 40s it was like, and it caused some weird feelings, but just the way, and again, you look at the way the scene plays in retrospect when you watch it again, it's heartbreaking because you see that these two, Alicia and Devlin, can be happy together and they love each other. And this is the last time you're going to see them happy until those, even that last, I mean, she's dying. Like, that's not totally happy. You know, he's carrying her down the stairs. It's triumphant, but that, where they're kissing, the dinner plan scene is just, that's the last time they're going to be happy. And it's all just heartbreak from here on out. And I think that's, indelible wise, I think that's the emotional high point of the movie where you're like, oh, this is what could have been. So I love that.
And I will just mirror a lot of the same attitudes that I think it was my freshman in high school band teacher that always said, an audience will remember how you start and how you end. And for whatever reason, that's always stuck with me, but I feel like the great masters of cinema, directors particularly, know how to start and end a film. If you look at Kubrick, you look at Nolan, they all have these memorable endings, these memorable beginnings. They have Nolan has a lot of set pieces early on in his films to really like inject you into the film and say, all right, now we're in a movie. Like, we're going to do this weird suspended plane sequence for Dark Knight Rises, or I'm going to give you the 3-act structure right away for The Prestige in the first like 90 seconds of the film. And we keep doing this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. But Hitchcock, in many ways, and not every film, like I won't say that his beginnings always are crisp, but the ones that we really go back to often enough, I think there's 90 seconds for North by Northwest before we get like right into the plot. Like that movie wastes zero time getting you right into it. Vertigo has that chase sequence on the roof. Rope has a murder in the first 30 seconds. He keeps doing this over and over. And yet at the end of his movies too, we have how many different set pieces that end these movies, whether it's on top of Rushmore or the Statue of Liberty, etc. He knows how to begin and he knows how to end a film. And so for me, the most indelible thing is that final shot as you see the light. And it kind of reminds me of the cover for Citizen Kane, where he's standing in the doorway and there's that shadow and light beaming at you. But it very much feels like the gates of hell, and he's got to walk back through and face his own death in that moment. And you're just like, oh, dude.
You led yourself here, man. Yep. Nobody to blame but yourself.
Absolutely. So that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That is the grades we've done so far for all 292 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes, we have one. Ben Jones, 84. American actor. The Dukes of Hazzard. Primary Colors. He also had a second career as a politician, member of the House of Representatives, 1989 to 1993. I believe he's represented a district in Georgia.
That would make sense for a Duke of Hazzard.
Yeah. Played Cooter.
That's right.
Before my time, gotta say. Sorry. But that being said, we recognize these here fondly for their contributions to the arts with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's move to best lines. I have Madame Sebastian. We are protected by the enormity of your stupidity for a time.
Alicia Huberman. When he told me a few years ago what he was, everything went to pot. I didn't care what happened to me. Now I remember how nice he once was. How nice we both were. It's a very curious feeling, a feeling as if something had happened in me, not to him. You see, I don't have to hate him anymore. Or myself.
Devlin, she looked like the ragged end of nowhere.
Alicia, this is a very strange love affair. Devlin, why? Alicia, maybe the fact that you don't love me?
Devlin, a man doesn't tell a woman what to do. She tells herself.
Alexander Sebastian, he's rather handsome, isn't he? Alicia Huberman, I'm allergic to American agents.
Devlin, dry your eyes, baby. It's out of character.
Okay. You need to work on your Grant.
I know. It needs a lot of work.
Hey, Diane, take a look at these swatches. Yeah.
Alicia Huberman, you're sore because you've fallen for a little drunk you tamed in Miami and you don't like it. It makes you sick all over, doesn't it? People will laugh at you. The invincible Devlin, in love with someone who isn't worth even wasting the words on.
Alicia, the important drinking hasn't started yet.
Alicia, there's nothing like a love song to give you a good laugh.
I'm out.
I got a few more.
I had a few more too, if I can find them.
Alicia, this chicken took longer than I expected. I hope it isn't done too much. It caught fire once.
Devlin, listen, you've chalked up another boyfriend, that's all. No harm done.
Alexander Sebastian, an old friend is never an extra guest.
Last one I've got. Alicia, my car is outside. Devlin, naturally.
My last one, Alicia Huberman, I guess I'm the girl nobody remembers. Okay, that takes us to the Stanley Rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy approximately 5 years after the film came out, so roughly 1951 to today. What is the legacy of this film is shared between two equal yet separate groups, the industry and the audience, 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go second.
On an industry level, I would initiate that it does not rise to the level of being on so many different lists and nominations and different things without having some level of legacy or remembrance of the film. It is a Criterion film at this point. Whether or not this is mentioned among Alfred Hitchcock's best films by a good swath of people, because I think if you ask the average person, name me 5 Alfred Hitchcock films, how long does this go before somebody mentions it? It's just not going to be near the top because he has so much great work. But by the same extension, I think this is recognized because of how much great work he has, that people try and experience all of his films, at least the people who really care. And I can't give this a 5. I'm not even going to go necessarily a 4.5 because while it's recognized, it's still not at the level of a lot of the films that we've put in the 4.5 or even 5 range. But I think a film such as this, which I wouldn't call it a cult classic, but it is something where it's a little bit more under the radar, it's a deeper cut, I would say is worthy of a 4. However, cutting against that is the audience appreciation. The name is kind of bland and ubiquitous and doesn't carry the same evocative nature of a Rear Window or a Dial M for Murder or Psycho, names that have some punch and some meaning that people have heard of. Even to a degree, like Rope is a forgettable name. But because they're attached to certain Hitchcock properties, I think people remember them a little bit more, particularly film fans. But when we did our famous office poll earlier today, one hand was raised among the entire cohort of nearly 30 people that we have. Now, granted, I will admit, and I often do, that this is a fairly homogenous, somewhat mostly rural set of people that are not huge film fans, but it does give us a little bit of feedback on the casual film fan going, where some of these people have definitely heard of some of the movies that we've covered. But this is a much deeper cut, even though it is from a famous director. So from that standpoint, I go down and I drop this near where I think there is a section of film fans that have seen this movie, but I don't think it's all film fans, so I can't even give it to like a 2.5. I'm going to go with a 2 there, and I end up at a 6.
Okay. I am going to, simply because of where it's in the rankings on so many of those lists, the fact that it's Ebert's favorite film, some of the critics at the time of its
not his favorite film, his favorite Hitchcock film.
film. So I did give it a 4.5 because I think it did pretty much cement Hitchcock and allowed him to have some degree of, well, I'll use the term rope, to do a few more films that he wanted to do. And as far as the public, I think a large portion of the true cinephiles have seen this film. And I think there are a few of them that really like the film. So I'm at a 2.5, so I'm a 7 overall.
Okay. Well, again, sorry to blow so much smoke up your guys' asses, but what I find so fascinating about the greatest movie of all time podcast is that, yeah, you have to look at things like there has to be an objective kind of point of view that you have to kind of factor in. And it sucks because, again, I keep mentioning like either your Searchers episode or your Empire Strikes Back episode. There are things obviously that, yeah, you can't. It's a sequel. Empire Strikes Back is a sequel, so you can't really factor in like the freshness of it, right? Because it's all that stuff. But then there's also the subjective, the subjective stuff that comes in. So looking at it from industry, I absolutely agree with you, Tom. It's like, yeah, when you think of Hitchcock, Notorious is not one of the first ones that people shout out, right? Psycho is going to be one. North by Northwest is going to be one. Rear Window, Vertigo. Those are the ones that you hear all the time. And when you say Notorious, some people are like, oh, yeah. So they have to remember it, but they remember it fondly. I think on that front, I'd have to give it a 4. I think because it's Hitchcock, I think this one is more, it makes an impact on you once you've seen it and you do remember it. It's just that you don't, well, maybe a 3.5. Let's do 3.5. It just doesn't come to mind immediately. It does for me, but not for industry-wise. And then audience-wise, like you said, Tom, too, it's like you see this on like Letterboxd. It gets like these high ratings. And I think it was a big hit. It was a showcase for Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman. And so from that point, I give it probably another 4 because it still doesn't. Does that make sense? It still doesn't quite hit the ranks of, Psycho, I'm going to know. Even though I like this more than a lot of the ones that you name drop a lot of the time. You have to factor in that, yeah, it doesn't quite hit the same recognizability factor with audiences. So in that, I guess, is that a tie with you, Dan? And that 7.5 is what I get that?
I had a 7.
7. Okay, so 7.5 is what I have.
So that's a 6.83 average between the three of us. Let's move to impact and significance. This is a measure of the impact and significance of the film approximately 5 years after it came out. So the initial 5 years, 1946 to roughly 1951. What is the impact and significance among the same two groups, the industry and the audience? 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, since I went first the last time, would you like to start here?
Sure. For the industry, it did not have a huge industry impact. Hitchcock was already doing really well. Ingrid Bergman had multiple Academy Award wins by this point in time. People did not recognize Cary Grant for how good he really was in this. Claude Rains got a nomination. Hitchcock didn't. It didn't get a lot of buzz. The reviews were okay. I don't think a lot of people got it. Which, again, I have a tendency, even though she's been long gone, to agree when I'm reading a review with Pauline Kael from the New Yorker. Yeah, but even it's quaint. Okay? I'm like, really? I don't find this quaint. I think that was what her comment was. It's a quaint film, another Hitchcock thriller. I think she missed the point. So I'm going to go with a 3.5. And for the public, it finished 8th. It did okay. It wasn't, a blockbuster, but it did okay. So I'm at a 4. So I'm at a 7.5 overall.
I don't know what you're reading for film criticism. Like, first off, Pauline Kael wrote that review like 30 years after this movie came out. And so her mention of quaint has to be somewhat of a compliment, not a negative. Because
Well, okay.
But that being said, the contemporary reviews that I saw, which were few, and for the most part, usually when you get these later or earlier films, it's tough to get a lot of the actual reviews, but were positive. Like, I don't find that there were too many even neutral ones. I think for the most part, they recognized this, but it was more of, again, the Academy not taking the more popular art of a Alfred Hitchcock and extending it to this is awards worthy. We're also in the same year where he's competing with, for example, The Best Years of Our Lives, which ranks very highly on our list, and It's Wonderful Life, which also ranks very highly on our list. And both films were featured in the CLP list last year. So from an awards attention perspective, to get original screenplay with both of those in there, and to get a Best Supporting Actor when you had some strong competition in a fairly good film year, I think is at least worthy of some level of recognition. I had that at a 4, but I also agree with your 4 on the audience. 8 is not, it's not one of the big movies. We reserve our 5s on the audience score for like Star Wars and Jaws and the big movies that broke box office numbers and people went out in droves and it caused a cultural sensation kind of thing. Even the 4.5s, you have to have been among the top few of that particular year, but it made 7 times its box office. It was not an unpopular film, and we gave a lot of credit last week to Casablanca making 4 times its budget only a few years prior. So from that standpoint, I also have it at your 4, but I have mine overall at an 8.
Impact, I think a lot of times when these movies come out, like we don't, like we're only talking like a 5-year window. Like if you're looking at from 46, like what, how many years is that? Like from 60 years, something like that, 80 years, being that old. Like we don't realize the impact of it, like maybe that soon. But as far as impact goes, the way that, again, Hitchcock took charge of this, Selznick was trying to, muscle in and have his say on things like he usually did. And Hitchcock and Heck were fighting back on him. And because Selznick had to deal with Duel in the Sun and he sold this to RKO, Hitchcock was able to take control of this production, and he served as his own producer, even though, and I think from this point on, he served as his own producer. I might be getting that wrong. He never took credit for it. But he was literally in charge of this movie like he hadn't been before. Like, no, Selznick let him do his thing, obviously, for the few movies that he made for him. But Hitchcock this is his first, I think, movie that's actually his. Everything from camera angles to sets to costumes to props, sound cues was all in the script. And then Truffaut, when he interviewed him for the Truffaut-Hitchcock, the book or the interview, he basically said that, what do I have? Of all your pictures, this is the one in which it feels the most perfect correlation between what you're aiming at and what appears on the screen. It's an ensemble as perfect as an animated cartoon. I think from an impact, like from that point on, having Hitchcock be in charge of his own destiny, I guess you could say, I think that's huge. But we don't really realize it, again, because it's Hitchcock and he has so many. But then again, from audience point of view, I think being number 8 for how many movies they release in a year or how many studios release particular movies, I think number 8 is pretty significant. Like, it's a big box office hit. Yeah, it's not as like, I don't think It's a Wonderful Life was a huge hit when it came out, right? It was kind of like looked down upon. So that didn't even really hit till later, much later when it was in syndication. But I just think as far as people liked it, people showed up for this. It was a big hit. It had, it's not groundbreaking. Hitchcock was Hitchcock. Bergman was Bergman. Grant was Grant. I think people were surprised by Grant, but I think people really loved this. And so as far as industry goes, I would give that a 4.5. Again, it's still not as mentionable as his other movies, but Hitch did take charge. And then from the audience point of view, I'd give it a 4. I think it did make an impact, that people liked it. And when you mention the name, it's like, oh yeah, I really like that movie. It's great, even though it's not always at the top of their mention. So I think that's an 8.5.
Of the top 10 supposed films and highest grossing for the year, Duel in the Sun is number 1, Best Years of Our Lives 2. And then it's a list of, with the exception being Notorious, of films I've barely have ever heard of. The Jolson Story, Blue Skies, Saratoga Trunk, The Razor's Edge, Night and Day, The Yearling, Till the Clouds Roll By. None of these that I really have that familiarity with. And so you could look at an average film year in the 40s, the 50s, whatever, and a bunch of these have not held up. And then there are a bunch of other ones where they may not have finished inside the top 10, but they do. This is just one of those rare examples where 3 out of 10 are ones that I've actually heard of, and I'm a film guy.
You think you know enough?
All right, so that is an 8 average between the three of us. Then let's move to novelty. This is a measure of the originality of anything having to do with the movie, although usually it's about the story material. And then the execution on everything in the movie in total, 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, since you led off the last category and you usually lead off classicness, I will start here. On an originality front, I led off the show in talking about the fact that this is a genre, the spy kind of thriller, that Hitchcock returned to a lot. The conspiracy, it's kind of a bit of a precursor of a genre, more or less, to like those 70s era thrillers that we're so used to and that we talked about probably a couple of months ago with Clute. Kind of in that realm, it feels somewhat Hitchcockian along that route. But because he's borrowing from things that he noticed or that he dealt with himself, I think this is a much better executed movie than it is an original movie. I think that the execution comes in the acting, a little bit of the script writing, and it's not so much of the material was all that different. If you're going to give it any sort of notoriety on the originality, it's in Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman playing against type in that time, but that is very context dependent, that I don't know if everybody who just looks at it and says Notorious, well, why is that so original if you have it? I ended up at a 3. I think that's bridging the gap a little bit. Like, I don't find this to be so unoriginal, like it's just basically paint by numbers, but I also don't find it to be the most original or audacious of his work either. And I think some of the stuff that he ended up doing in the late 50s, the early 60s is probably much more him realizing the peak of his own originality and audacity that he could actually get to. But as far as an execution, and I know you guys are going to push back on me against this, I have this at a 4. I think this is a very well executed movie. It is not the peak of execution that I've seen. I think that it is led by 3 really good performances and then a bunch of performances somewhere in between where it's like, well, we just need somebody to stand here and say a line and look good and whatever. There's some stuff in the periphery. I also think that some of the story at times lost me. Like, there was some threads that we put down here and then we didn't pick back up. And it just kind of, I know that this morning when you presented it to the office for the office poll, Dad, you said that there were no spots where this movie was boring. I'm not sure I necessarily agree. There are a couple of small, it's not very long, but there are some spots where it did lose my attention a little bit. And I know I'm not the average person, because most people think of this movie very highly when they've actually seen it. But I have this at a 4, and thus I have a 7 here.
Well, I gave it a 4.5 for originality and for the psychological dialogue between Bergman and Grant and the way they interacted and how they both were having to play the characters and their own internal turmoil. I'd never seen that before, and I almost wonder if Hitchcock tried it here and it didn't really gel with the public. It was too much for them. So he never really tried to get that psychologically embedded again until Vertigo, which also fell flat with the public. So I can't give it any more than that. As far as execution, I'm at a 4.5 because the shot work, the camera angles, the way it was done, the whole discovery of the MacGuffin, everything about it. The only thing is he's done, and if this were some other director, maybe I'd give it a 5, but I'm so used to the standard of Hitchcock, I can't go the full 5 because he did so much better work later on. So I'm at a 9.
Like I said, your rubric is one of those things where you're approaching things objectively, and when you look at it that way, I have to go, damn it, they're right. That's one of those things. I think this originality, it doesn't, and we say today that there's nothing original under the sun, right? I mean, everything is just what is Top Gun Maverick? It's not the plane, it's the pilot, right? It depends on how it's done. So when you look at the originality of this, you look at, just look at Hitchcock, look at 39 Steps, look at Foreign Correspondent, Lady Vanishes, all the spy stuff. He'd done this before. This was his bread and butter that he grew up on, right? So, and then again, execution is, you have to separate those. You're just looking at the originality. When somebody tells you this is the plot of the movie, again, it's like Casablanca. It's the same kind of intrigue, wartime intrigue, right? It's not totally groundbreaking. And so from that point of view, I have to give it a 3 objectively, because it's not the most original thing, right? But when we go over, and again, this is when subjectivity comes into it. When you go over to the execution, I give this a full-on 5. This is my second favorite Hitchcock movie. You talk about how, he does, a lot better things, or better or more indelible work in the 50s and 60s. I kind of look at that as it just depends on where you come at it, right? Like Paul Thomas Anderson, I know, to talk about a filmmaker today, I know that people love There Will Be Blood, right? I know people love, all the stuff that he's done recently, right? They love those movies. But for me, I'm more of a Boogie Nights Paul Thomas Anderson fan. I'm more of a Magnolia. I think The High was Punch Drunk Love for me, for Paul Thomas Anderson. That's just what I like. I think There Will Be Blood is a little bit too cumbersome for its own good in my eyes, right? And I think that's where Hitchcock is. I think my sweet spot for Hitchcock is his 40s work, where it's just all about this 30s and 40s work. It's all about this classically structured entertainment that really works. And to do that same thing that he'd already done with Foreign Correspondent or 39 Steps, and to give it this moral, emotional complexity, where it's about the byplay between characters that's really so intense and really plays it. I think every scene has a moment of, that's a fantastic look inside these characters and where they're coming from. I think every moment plays for me perfectly, to the point, again, where it gets to that end and everything just melds so perfectly. And so I have no issue with the execution here. I think it's just, everything is just pitch perfect, and I just adore it. And so what we do, a 3 to a 5, that's an 8 for Novelty for me.
And that is the average between the three of us. You guys are giving me some easy math to work with tonight. It's lining up perfectly that way. Let's move to Classicness. This is a measure of how well or not the film has aged. This is a category rife with nuance and all sorts of different aesthetics, more or less. We start this category at the median point being a 6 instead of a 5 because, let's face it, in the internet age, we felt that it was easier for people to tear things down than it was going to be to build them up. And so by that extension, we wanted to build in a little bit of buffer. So with that in mind, we're going to turn to our senior graying nuance correspondent, Dana.
I'm way beyond graying. I'm there. Anyway, this is a film that if it were done and shot and released today would be just as relevant and poignant, I think. I think it would have, would it, you want more action sequences? Maybe, but it still could be done today and be entertaining and fairly popular. The fact that we have a female or a actress's character actually having depth and some pizzazz in a time when it was not that common to find those types of roles for women. So I'm going to give 2 for being poignant and up to date. I'm going to give it 1 more for the fact that Bergman had a really juicy part to work with. But I think you mentioned earlier the drunk driving scene. I'm giving it half a point down, so I'm at an 8.5.
So this is where I'm going to bring up the term quaint again, because one of the reasons that I think we love this era of film, and also somewhat the 50s as well, is it feels very throwback, very classic, very within a certain framing of how movies are supposed to look and how they're supposed to feel. And it gives us a certain level of comfort. And that's why I feel like the use of the term quaint is not a negative, but rather it's like calling something cute. It puts it in a box, but it's a box that we like and that we return to and feel safe with. And so this film, by that standard, it has its measures and its drawbacks and its ups and downs. For example, you mentioned a strong depth of character for at least our two leads. And then I would say that is somewhat outweighed or at least equally weighed against when we talk about the slut shaming that kind of goes on a lot in this movie and doesn't decide on which side of the fence it's really going to stick on. You could talk about the drunk driving, but by the same token, this is post-war America where in context, that really wasn't a big deal yet. It wasn't a big deal for several decades until it became a much bigger thing as America got more into their cars. We didn't really get even into the highway system until the next decade. So that wasn't part of what they were experiencing yet with how we lived or how it was part of everyday life. I think I kind of even out with points up and points down, save for one particular aspect, and that is we often award classicness or timelessness points to something that has been out for a long time but still feels watchable. And I wouldn't say necessarily fresh. That, yes, I think the movie would be very different if it were updated today. I think you could take the premise of this movie and re-release it, but there are some things you would have to update. A few of the things that I already mentioned, and you would have to interject a few things because Steven Spielberg kind of broke the mold with Indiana Jones and having an action set piece every 10 minutes, and the audience has never let their ADHD forget it from that point there forward. And now as we move
Excellent
to
point.
everything is 90 seconds or 2 minutes on TikTok until the next piece of stimuli is up on our phones. I just wonder, you're going to have to add some action set pieces to keep people interested. There will be a car chase. There will be somebody emerging from someplace that you didn't expect. There will be a little bit more pressurized here or there. But on a timelessness level, I give this a +2, so I'm at an 8.
So I have a difficult time. Again, your list of the, and I'm forgetting, what is the technical term for your greatest movies of all time list? What did you call it?
The Cinema Legacy poll or
Cinema Legacy poll. I just keep calling it your greatest movies. I'm like, that's not what it was actually called. But putting that list together, all of my movies were judged, and it was tough because I had to look at movies like, subjectively me liking them, but I also had to look at them as what made the mold, what made it the standard. And so that's what I judge movies on a lot of the time. I also have a hard time. I can't watch movies like with your Toy Story episode. Yeah, you could say that the animation is dated, but I look at it as, that's the animation they could do at the time. So I can't really judge it that way. That would be like me looking at King Kong from 1933 and saying, this special effects look dated. I can't say that because the special effects in King Kong are so wondrous and so personal to me that they stand side by side with Jurassic Park perfectly. It's just the time that they were made, the context they were made. And so looking at Notorious, the slut shaming is a little bit too much, and Tom, you're right. They don't really land on whatever side it is until the very end when he puts all his prejudices aside. So that can be punched up a little bit. There's some, I don't know, like some of the character work, it doesn't quite go as far as like you would see it in a movie today, if that makes any sense. But again, for 1946, the way that this was so adult and mature compared to a lot of the stuff out there, for me, I just look at it, and also like in Ebert's review, you talk about adding like car chases and things like that. Sure, but to me that would lessen the movie and the impact for me, because when I think of classicness, I think of this is how movies should be. if that makes any sense. I want a movie that's like this. Ebert says in his review that a movie like this would usually end with a shootout. But I think we've lost the ability and the gift to end a movie on an intelligent note. We want to end it in a way that's like, oh, this is going to get attention. People get shot. People die. A lot of blood, a lot of noise. The way that this movie ends with a super suspenseful theme of just these characters walking downstairs, two of them walking to their salvation, like Ebert says, and one of them marching back up to his doom. I think that is the standard that I want to judge movies by. I don't want movies to end with gunfights and a car chase and resolve things like that, even though Hamlet did that, right? Ended with a battle with an action scene. I look at this as, this is how movies should be. This is how movies should be told. Even though there's some fudging around the edges, the driving stuff, the back projection, you can tell what that is. It doesn't totally sell that. So as far as classicness goes and selling what I think a movie should be and what you should hold movies up today as a standard, I end up at a 9 for this. How's your math on that? Tom?
Yeah, you give me wonderful math yet again with an 8.5, where we line up perfectly. We had an 8, an 8.5, and a 9. It just seemingly it lines up that way yet again for the third straight category. Yeah, I know.
Nazis.
I don't know why I hitched that. That was an odd moment.
Yet again. And I helped.
Okay. I think you've had a little too much dad juice. Let's move to rewatchability.
It's an old commercial.
I know. That's not what I'm exactly talking about, but it's fine. Let's move to rewatchability. This is a measure, well, basically insert your own subjective test here. The one thing or the one caveat that we've tried to build upon, because this category has mostly been about, do you like the film or not, and on like a scale of 1 to 10 kind of thing. But it really should be somewhat reserved for how likely is somebody to go back and rewatch the movie after they've seen it the first time. Like, what is the impetus to see this? Dana's often equated it to, like, how long do you need to wait in between viewings of the film where it doesn't age for you, or you could pop it right back on kind of thing. And there are certain movies that I've put up among the true 10s in this, where I could watch it back to back, and sometimes I have, and it doesn't age for me at all. But out of 10, what is this for you? And so normally, because our guests have a certain level of enthusiasm for the films that they pick to come on with us, and I have a feeling I know that this is going to be a relatively high score, but let's start with our guest on this one.
Yeah, I'm going to have to... Okay, here it's interesting. I'm going to go with a 10 on this. And the reason I go with a 10 rewatchability is because movies today have become so homogenized and so paint by numbers and so color. It's why I have a hard time going out and watching Spider-Man 15, because I know what I'm going to get, right? And I have my issues with, like, again, let's pick on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think because it's a franchise, it has certain beats that it needs to hit. And when you've seen enough of those beats, you get really bored by them. And you kind of, me personally, I long for something else. So the caveat with me giving this a 10 is that, yeah, there are dozens of movies that I could pick that I could put on after getting bored and be reinvigorated by. Does that make sense? Like, if I get bored with movies and think, what am I doing? Why am I watching these things? And then I put on Notorious, I'm like, this is why I watch movies. And I can do that with dozens of movies, but Notorious, like, I would not have a problem ending this conversation and going and watching it again, because I think there's some nuance that I'll pick up on that I'll adore. I think every scene is just pitch perfect. I don't have, and even if you kind of feel it's a little bit off, the way that it ends, like you talk about endings, it just ends in such a perfect way that, yeah, I would watch this from the perspective of, this is how you, and I said this in the novelty part, this is how you make a movie. This is what I want from a movie. I want to be wowed by the filmmaking. I want to be wowed by the performances. I want to be wowed by the themes and the storytelling. And this is a movie that's, yeah, it's not my favorite movie of all time, but it has a lot of the elements of my favorite. So yeah, I'm going to just go with a 10 on this. So whether that's a cop-out or not, I think this is a perfect movie, the way that it's just structured and written and everything. So yeah, that's where I'd put it.
To balance this out slightly, I'm going to skip right to it. I tend to try and do this from a wide swath objective audience perspective as opposed to the subjective, even though I tell everybody else to lean into their subjectiveness during this category. I think that this movie is a little bit slow at times, and it's not terribly paced. Like it for the 100 minutes that it's on, it's not poor. Like, and it interjects you into the film very quickly. You're in between stuff, but there are some moments where it does get a little bit tired here and there. And I think that one of the things that I always, especially when I'm suggesting it to people who aren't used to watching classic film or aren't charmed by the quaintness, in air quotes, of a classic film from the 40s or 50s, is that they just don't have the patience sometimes for things to kind of play out. They don't have the patience for non-stimuli, for movies that are just talking and people in rooms and whatever else. People like me who come from a theater background love that kind of thing, but for the general audience that expects a Die Hard kind of action movie and leans into a lot of the stuff. I mean, if you love Michael Bay, all the power to you. I can't stand it. just me. So I give this a 6 because I think that for the people that I would suggest it to, they are likely to rewatch it after that point. But I wonder how much of the rest of the public that just turns this on and is like, oh, that was good, and then never watches it again.
So what was your number? Did I miss it?
6,
Did I
think.
not say a 6? Okay.
You said 6.
Okay.
So I did miss it. Well, I'm going to make this real easy. I'm at an 8.
All right.
I love this film. I'm going to probably watch it more often than I do. And it's 8 is within my sphere. Is it going to be on as much as some of the other Hitchcock films like North by Northwest? Probably not. Or even Dial M for Murder. But it's going to be in that trope where I'm going to have about 10 or 15 movies that I'm going to watch a lot. Simply, if I'm homesick or it's a rainy day and I don't feel like reading, throwing this on, and I don't need to pay that close of attention to because I just enjoy it. It's like mac and cheese. So it's an 8.
Can I just say before you give the average, Tom, that I wish I could get more upset about this. I wish I could get more Andrew with Fight Club about this. But all the things that you've said, the both of you, I can't disagree with it. Does that make sense? Because it's like our movies that we watch were subjective. We said this at the top of the episode. It's like you are approaching this from a different perspective than I am. And I can't expect you and I can't get mad at like Tom for giving this a 6 because that's just the way that you feel, right? I feel differently. I'm not going to get mad at you for that, but that's why we're talking. We're having this conversation, and I understand where you're coming from, if that makes any sense. So I wish, like I said, I wish I was more of an asshole about this, but I'm not. I love where you guys are coming from and how you explain it. Dana, the way you explain it, this is an 8, like, and it's not as much as the other ones you'd watch. Like, yeah, that's you, right? And you're giving perfect, like, explanations for that. So I can't get mad at it. It's just we're having a conversation. We all like this movie. We all like to love this movie, right? So I can't get mad about something. Because you're not giving it a 10, Tom, I'm not going to write you off as a friend. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go and unfollow you on Twitter. That would be stupid. I just like that we're talking and I understand your point of view now. And especially from somebody, Tom, watching this for the first time. And Dana, somebody watching, like you've watched this forever. You've had this for decades in your rotation. So, yeah, great vantage point from where I'm looking at it.
I do appreciate the fact that indirectly, somebody we met through Andrew has now indirectly called him an asshole. Just wanted to put that out there.
Oh, I'll put it out there. He knows I love him.
when he listens back to this in about a month.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
All right.
We're all assholes.
But moving to audience score on this one, we had a 7.9 for our IMDb users and a 91% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.5. So to repeat the categories, we only had one weird decimal in this entire conversation, and it was legacy, which was a 6.83. Impact and significance, we had an 8. Novelty, an 8. Classicness an 8.5, rewatchability an 8, and audience score an 8.5. Boy, a lot of 8s there.
That's pretty good.
For a final total of 47.83, and currently placing it on our list at number 112 between Batman and From Here to Eternity.
Oh, that's good. That's a weird company.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, the fact that you have like so many 8s, like that's nice. That's good, I guess.
So the ones immediately surrounding it, 108 is Memento, Shane 109, 110 Rocky, 111 the original Batman, now Notorious at 112, 113 From Here to Eternity, 114 Peter Panchali, 115 Patton.
Wow. Controversially, let me just say I'm not a huge Batman fan. Original Batman fan. So the fact that Notorious didn't beat that pisses me off.
Missed out by 0.09 of a point.
Wow. Okay.
Missed by that much.
But that being said, if you do have any complaints or you want to be that person on the internet that constantly gives us crap about, well, let's just face it, most of the comments that I get on our videos are about how fat I look. And
Argument lost.
I don't care. I just delete those immediately, whatever. If you want to waste your energy on that, I'm not going to spend any time on you. But if you have some constructive criticism, let's say, you can find us at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at gmotepodcast, or you can write us at ronnieduncanstudios.com/gmotepodcast. Let's go to some remaining questions for this film. How different is the 1940s if you could kiss another man's wife, not get slugged, and then show up as a house guest without getting immediately thrown out? I don't think there's an answer to that question, but it's like, what?
Well, the Nazis had notoriously low standards, so...
Okay. I didn't know the Fuhrer was exercising prima nocta.
There are a few country songs that would fit.
Yeah, that's true.
Question number 2. What was Alicia poisoned with? Personally, I think it's the uranium ore.
Oh.
And so that they're like giving her radioactive poisoning.
Interesting. I just thought it was, strychnine or something like that. Or arsenic. To quote another Cary Grant movie.
Because that informs my next question. Does Alicia survive? Because if she's getting something that lethal, I have a hard time believing that she makes it out of there and very much further. Like, she should have probably seen medical care a lot sooner than she does. And the fact that it was delayed, I don't know if she makes it.
I think she would. Just part of me.
I really look at this as like a fairy tale-ish kind of ending, right? Because you see the bad guys punished and you see the heroes win. And so it's the prince marching in to save his princess. I think he makes it to the hospital in time. I think as weird as it sounds, I think it's his love that basically helps her survive. Like it gets her in there to live long enough. So yeah, she definitely lives in my.
And then finally, my last one, and this may seem obvious to some, but I'm going to still ask it anyway. Do Sebastian and his mother both die? I think we're led to believe that Sebastian is basically a goner unless he can talk his way out of it, which to this point, he hasn't shown a true gift for. I don't think he probably makes it, but the mother seems to line herself up against the son. I wonder if she sells him down the river to save her own skin.
Yeah. As leathery as it is.
That's okay. I love that. That's actually, I didn't even consider that. I know for a fact that he's dead because they killed off the other guy very simply. But yeah, she's very much more in line with the Nazi party, right? She's more in line with their ideals. But the fact that she's obviously his mom, I mean, that technically if they're that trigger happy, they're going to kill her immediately with him.
Let me put it this way. He had the money. That's, it was his house. He had the business. he had the money that was funding this. If they kill him, they lose their money, except if they let mom survive. Because even under
Are you going to
Spanish
pontificate on Brazilian law?
she would have inherited the money.
And it's not Spanish law, it would be Portuguese law.
That's true. So, yes. But yes.
Line of demarcation here.
Another great point, yeah.
All right. So, remaining questions for either of you?
I have one. Why is it that an entire generation just did not seem to realize the genius of Hitchcock? And the only thing I can think of is Hitchcock was to film what Impressionism was to art in the late 19th, early 20th century, which is it took another generation for people to understand or appreciate it as an art form.
I think of it maybe in the same direction as like pop art, which was mainstream, but maybe not in the same way that it was like critically acclaimed. Then again, I'm not like an art critic, and I or for that matter, an art historian to be able to reconcile those ideas. But
You're seeing a lot of pushback on Spielberg, especially with Disclosure Day that came out, and a lot of Spielberg's Spielberg, like, is indelible, right? I mean, he created a lot of the film language, blockbuster. Well, created maybe the film language with Jaws, right? And Star Wars followed suit, all of that. And I think audiences today, they don't realize the context of that. And I think Spielberg is maybe, yeah, he's the modern day Hitchcock in my opinion, because again, Hitchcock was so good at the pop entertainment, and the cinephiles, or the critics, right, the leading cinephiles, they kind of looked at that as, oh yeah, he can create entertainment, but entertainment isn't really lasting, right? Entertainment really doesn't make its mark, which is totally wrong, right? Because entertainment, something being entertaining is just as much as something being like life-changing or mind-melting. And then also you look at Spielberg, like, just playing around, doing what he wants to do. He's kind of lost the pulse, that he doesn't have his finger on the pulse of the public anymore, even though he's making movies that are still pretty good. And Hitchcock was the same way. I think when he went family plot, The Trouble with Harry, not quite as good as his original stuff, but he's still making movies. He was still doing what he wanted to do. And I just think that cinephiles today, Dana, that was a great question. I just think that they don't really, whether they want to admit it or not, I think a lot of these people that claim to be cinephiles, yeah, they're going to look down at the pop entertainments, right? The people that are really into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I don't think those are the people that consider themselves cinephiles. And cinephiles will look down at that stuff too. But I just think that people just don't understand context and don't recognize the language in the movies they love came from these other guys. I really think that's where it comes from. But I guess my only question for you guys is, what is your favorite Hitchcock movie that you've seen? My number one, and I've said Notorious is my number two. I've got Vertigo. Even though I said this 1930s, 40s stuff is my sweet spot, I think Vertigo is, if you look at a masterpiece, that is Hitchcock. All his obsessions, all his foibles. If you want to know about Hitchcock, just in a 2-hour time frame, watch Vertigo and you see everything. But what are your two favorite Hitchcock movies, if you had to pick one?
if we're talking favorites, North by Northwest is pretty much number one for me. And I'm going to go with Rope as 2.
North by Northwest and probably Dial M is number 2 for me.
Yep. No arguments. Great movies. North by Northwest, one of the most fun movies you'll ever see. I know there are people listening to your podcast that probably have never seen it, right? Which is kind of unheard of. Get out there and fix that. Especially if you like James Bond. I think it was the precursor of the James Bond movies, with the intrigue and everything in there. And so, yeah, recognize the context.
It's inside our top 10 for a reason. I mean, mostly because both of us are really in the camp for that movie, but still.
Right. Sure.
Such is life.
Our show, well, whatever.
Yeah.
But hearing no other questions, I want to thank our guest for being with us for his first time. You are certainly welcome back anytime, my friend, and we've already got you signed up for a couple of episodes next year. But just remind everybody what you're working on and where they can find you.
Again, Nostalgia Cast, back to Bluey. We're still in the middle of seasons right now. Some really good conversations. So please listen to some episodes and give us some feedback. You can find me on Twitter at DW Lundberg, Blue Sky at dwlundberg.bsky.social, and at Threads at Darren Lundberg. Again, just listen to what I'm kind of like you, Tom. It's like I just want to start conversations and I want to get a beat on what people are thinking, what they think. I'm not here to gotcha. I'm not here to shame you. You know what I mean? I'm here to just talk and figure out where you're coming from. And I think it's really, again, an honor being a part of this, even 300 episodes in, and the fact that hopefully I held up pretty well with your other guests. But I really appreciate you guys, and it's that is the thing that I strive for, is having conversations. So yeah, let's keep that ball rolling.
All right, thank you very much for being on. Dad, since this episode has gone a little bit longer, did you have anything that you wanted to do for final thoughts? Otherwise, I think I'm good for the week.
No, I'll just not.
Okay. All right, so that looks like a good spot for us for the week. Thank you all for listening. I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Next week, for our 327th episode, we discuss La La Land from 2016, celebrating its 10th anniversary. Written and directed by Damien Chazelle, cinematography by Linus Sandgren, music by Justin Hurwitz, editing by Tom Cross, starring Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone, John Legend, and Rosemary DeWitt. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, Threads, or TikTok at the handle @CheapMovePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.